right, babe.
Welcome, welcome. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As you all know, I am Crystal Ward, the founder of Greater Than Expectations. You're probably wondering where Tiana is. Tiana is out today, and so I have the pleasure of interviewing our guest. This guest is a special friend of mine. We've known each other for several years, and they happen to be our first male guest on the show. So I'm going to bring him in. His name is Dr. Jesse Rivers. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing? Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you
great.
fine. So thank you for joining us tonight. As I said, I've known you for several years, and we'll probably get into that a little later. But can you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about who Dr. Jesse Rivers is and your foster story?
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you for having me, Dr. Ward. As you mentioned, we've been knowing each other. It's going on 20 years almost. When you were a young college student at Central Missouri. So, and I was teaching in the Kansas City, Missouri School District. So thank you for having me on Defying the Odds. So I'm going to share my story a little bit. Originally, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. And there are seven of us in my family, 7 siblings. I'm number 5. I have 2 older brothers, 2 older sisters, and 2 younger sisters. So my story with the foster system started at the death of my mom. Actually, my mom died a day before my 3rd birthday. So you know how when you become an age where you become conscious? Well, literally on my way to foster home, because it was such a tragic moment, it's when I became conscious. That's when I knew that Jesse Rivers existed. And I can remember being in the back of a Volkswagen Beetle, the old 70s kind. I don't want to date myself. And my big brother was up front. And I can remember sitting in the back seat. My feet did not touch the floor. And, you know, in those days, the babies wore those white shoes, you know.
Yes,
I can remember looking at my white hard shoes. And I can remember crying. And I was crying for this figure called Daddy. I don't know who Daddy was, but I can remember my words. I was calling for Daddy. And my big brother, who he's the same now as he was then, he looked back and told me to shut up. So, you know, to stop crying. So, and we got to this house and we got out the van, the car, and there were dogs running toward us. I can remember hiding behind my big brother, afraid of the dogs. And this older lady came out the house and she had this big smile on her face and she was welcoming us into her home. And that was my first moment with the foster system. At that time, I didn't know it was the foster system. And let me give you a little bit of history. Before foster home, we actually went, in those days, they had what you call orphanages. And we went to an orphanage in Memphis, Tennessee at that time, ran by an organization called Porter Lee. It was Porter Lee Home. So I can remember that was my first time being in this big room, one of my earliest memories. And there were baby beds in this large room. And I can remember standing at the edge of a baby bed looking toward the kitchen, you know. And I just knew intuitively my middle brother was next to me. You know, how I knew that, I don't know. So we went from the orphanage after my mother died. Now, my mother died, and you know, there's a lot of things called kinship adoptions and things of that nature. Well, actually, my grandmother, who lived in Arkansas, she actually had custody of us. So my grandmother had us, but as fate would have it, she died soon after.
Oh
So I
man.
actually went from my mother dying to my grandmother taking us in Osceola, Arkansas. And then she eventually died. And I don't know the particulars because I was a baby, literally. But we ended up in foster home, and they split us up, 7 of us. My 2 older sisters went together. They put my big brother and me together because I'm the youngest son. My middle brother and my sister after me, they put together. And my baby sister, who was literally a month old when our mother died, she went into the foster system alone. So that was my introduction to foster home for the next 4 years.
Okay. What happened? Like you said, they split several of you up. And I know the system has changed a lot. Like you said, it used to just be orphanages and things of that nature. And now we have a lot of homes. And as you said, people go into kinship care and things of those natures. And they do try to keep kids together, even though I do know that there are young adults who get split up, especially when there's multiple. Did you have the chance to be reunified with any of your siblings or family?
Well, I always knew who my siblings were. That was just who. And my foster mom would let me call them. I would call my big sisters and my brother and other sister and my baby sister. So I knew who they were. And we would have visits periodically with my father downtown Memphis at some location. So we would always get together at a park or something of that nature. So I knew who they were. Now, we were in the foster care system for 4 years. My father remarried, and, at that time, I think they assumed that children belong with a woman, if you will. So my 2 older sisters, they were old enough. They made their own decision to continue to stay in foster home. And I think that's because they knew my mom. They knew who she was. And they were teenagers. And so they chose to stay in the foster care system. But the 5 of us, my older brother on down, my middle brother, myself, and 2 younger sisters, we moved back in with my father and stepmother. So yes, part of us reunited, if you will. But we always knew my older sisters, they would come around and visit. So they were very much a part of our lives.
Awesome. Do you think, if looking back over your experience, as you said, one, you went into kinship care with your grandmother, then your grandmother tragically passed away, and then being a part of the system, what's the one thing, if anything good, came from being a part of the system? That did the system teach you anything that you still apply to your daily life now?
Well, I'm a bit of a historian by nature, and the unique thing about the city I grew up in, I can't think of the lady's name, but you can look her up. Actually, in Memphis is where they changed the foster care system. There was a lady in the 20s and the 30s. She ran orphanages, and she would adopt babies to the rich and famous across the country. Well, there was a lot of abuse going on. In the orphanage. So, and this went on for years and years and years. And there's some famous people we know today who were adopted through her system. I'm not familiar if you know this guy, Ric Flair, the wrestler, he was adopted through her system. So because of that, they started changing the system. When I came around, they were moving more from the orphanages to foster care. One thing about the system that it's needed, I think it's a system that's needed because there's so many, particularly African American children who don't have homes. And for some reason in our community, I'm going to say this, in our community, there has been a stigma to either foster or adopt kids who are not biologically ours.
Yeah.
So in the 70s, there became a movement. If you know your history, in the 70s, you started having more white couples, white families starting to adopt Black children.
Yeah.
So then you had the Black social workers organizations, and Black children belong with Black parents. So I'm sorry, I had something in my ear. So people stopped really adopting Black children, if you will. They started going overseas to adopt, children from China, Japan, and so forth. So what you have is a burden on the system with an enormous amount of Black children in the system. Then you come up to the 80s where you have the crack epidemic. So now you have a situation where grandmothers and grandfathers, they're not able to take all the children of one of their children's children. So that created more of a backlog in the system. So for me personally, it impacted me that when I wanted to have children, and there were some reasons why I didn't have biological children. Not that I could not, but there were just reasons why I could not. At that time, my ex-wife and I, we decided to adopt.
I love it.
So so for me, it was a natural fit. Now I understand that some people won't. They don't feel that connection. But as you ask my background, I know that there's so many children in the system. And if you ever have a chance to go to a foster home fair, adoption fair, it'll break your heart. I can remember one little boy, he was about 5. He was in his suit and he was determined to get adopted. And, he was articulate. It just, I wish I could take them all.
Right.
So there's a need for education. And also, as a school administrator, I know you're going to get to that later on, Dr. Ward. I knew high school kids in the system.
Yeah.
And I knew kids who were aging out the system. So where do these kids go home for break during college? Who do they call when they need a little gas money? What connections do they have? So a lot of times when they age out the system, that's it. So there's a need to have these young people stay connected. So that's why I really appreciate your organization, Greater Than Expectations, because it's needed. It really is.
Thank you. So you're right. So you led into this, and there's so many things I want to touch on with you. But you said, and we have the comment, reminds me of the adoption fair episode on A Different World, the young man with his suit on wanting to be adopted. And so there are so many young adults who are a part of the system. I think, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure it's about 430,000 youth that are currently in the system every single year, waiting to be adopted out or a part of the system. So you said that you and your ex-wife were able to adopt. How many are all of your children? I know this answer before the audience. Are all of your children biologically or yours, or are they adopted? How many did you end up adopting? Yeah,
my children are adopted.
Mm-hmm.
And we love them all just the same. So there's no, I really forget that, that they're adopted. It's a situation where if they want to connect with their biological family, that information is there, because that's a curiosity people are going to have.
Right.
So I'm of the mindset, I will help you, because I know that's an itch you need to scratch. But always know where your family is, and just don't have any surprises. Things are not what they always may appear to be, because there's a reason, that you fell into the system.
For sure. We had a past guest who talked about that, who did go on the hunt for her biological family, and it didn't necessarily turn out the way she wanted. So definitely understand that. Let's backtrack. Before you were able to marry and decide to adopt children, so you have that special impact. You joined the military. Tell us about that. Like, you're a veteran, so thank you for your service. What made you want to transition into the military? Was it like, hey, this is my way out, I can do something with myself? Was there influence there? Tell us about that story.
Well, I grew up in a tough environment. Memphis, had its challenges even then. We know Memphis today, but even then, in the 70s and early 80s, there were challenges. And I experienced a lot of those challenges. I took JROTC in high school, played high school football. So I was thinking football scholarship, like so many young men. I had a few partial offers, but nothing that would sustain me through 4 years of college. I really didn't have anyone talking to me about college. So I fell in that sort of average student range, if you will. Not a real knucklehead, not part of the, I knew different groups. So when it was time for me to make a decision, I just wanted to leave Memphis. So I thought I was going to the Air Force. And I took the test. I scored high enough to go to the Air Force, but unfortunately, I could never get a hold of the recruiter. So I was determined to leave. I said, I'm leaving Memphis on the first train out. So I walked downtown Memphis at that time, and it may still be there, the old Federal Building. Mm-hmm. And I walked in, and there was a Marine Corps recruiter who would come to the school quite a bit. I would tell him I'm not joining the Marines. There's no way. So lo and behold, I walked in his office and I said, hey, sign me up. So literally I graduated, I don't know, June 4th. And I think June 27th, I was at Paris Island. Wow. So I was, once I got to Paris Island, I was like, what?
What did I do? What did I sign up for?
Yeah, what did I do? But you're young, you can run all day, And I didn't have anywhere else to go. So I knew I had to make it. So each day, when I thought about where am I going,
that's what
you got to keep going. So I definitely worked through Paris Island, and I spent 8 years in the United States Marine Corps, and to this day, some of the best memories, of my life.
Awesome. Awesome. Again, thank you for your service. And so you said there you already knew you had to make it. There was no going back. You were trying to get out of Memphis. And so you did that, but then you also did some other things along the way, right? You had the opportunity to study a little bit of law and become a school administrator. So tell us about that, because that's definitely defying the odds, right? And overcoming, being a part of the system. And before you talk about that, again, the reason why we have this show is hopefully it's online, it's on YouTube. Some people are watching it on Facebook now. We're building connections with current foster agencies. And the thought behind it is it's time for people to have the opportunity to share their story, but also hopefully to provide a little bit of happiness, hope, for those that are currently in the system. If you did it, they can do it too. And so tell us about that journey of becoming a school administrator and practicing or studying law.
Well, I like to say, Dr. Ward, we all have a sad story. Mm-hmm. If we all sat around and talked and shared our story, all of us would be crying. That's true. Now that we all have a sad story, what are we going to do? My story may be sad to some. There's some that has sadder stories. Trust me. So I made a decision to better myself. I just knew there was something outside of Memphis that I needed to reach. I did not want to maintain the status quo. So, I went to college in Orange County, California, Chapman University. I was stationed out there. I got out, went to college in Orange County. My degree was history. So what do you do with the history degree? You got a BA in history, so big deal. So I had no plans for law school, but it was the next logical step. I got accepted to several law schools in California, which I had planned to attend. But I had a sister in Kansas City who I hadn't seen in maybe 10 years. I just hadn't seen her. So I thought this may be a good time to reconnect with family after being in the Marines and going to college. And this is my oldest sister.
Okay.
So I applied to University of Missouri, Kansas City, never heard it, never seen it, didn't know what it was.
Just did it.
So I applied, and they sent me an acceptance letter. So, I got in the old SUV, and I drove across country. And I landed in Kansas City, and it was humid that summer, I remember. And I was thinking, wow, I haven't felt this since I left Memphis, And I can remember driving down Truth thinking, why does everyone park on the side of the street? Don't they know people can run into them? So that was a Kansas City thing. So I went to law school, UMKC. I did manage to work with a personal injury law firm. I was a law clerk for Judge Thomas Newton, who was on the state court. And he's now with the Court of Appeals, Missouri Court of Appeals. I was there for a brief moment with Judge Lisa White Hartwick. I was her clerk momentarily, but she wanted to bring in, her person, which was fine. So the law really wasn't a passion, if you will. It wasn't like, oh, I want to be the next Johnny Cochran. It wasn't. For some people it is, but for me it really wasn't. But I knew I wanted to impact young people, going back to my time as a foster child.
Yes.
And my passion. So I had an opportunity to enter education, and I did. And I worked in Kansas City at a high school, tough high school, by the way. And I like to say back then I was in my prime, so I could handle it. I don't know if I can handle it now, but at that time I could. I was up for the task. And one thing students know, and I still hear from those students, that they knew when they entered room 209 they was going to learn, no matter what was going on out in the hallways or whatever. And that particular school made the news quite a bit during that tenure. And that's when I met you, Dr. Ward, during the summer program. Yeah, we took a group of kids to, I want to get the name right. Is it still Central Missouri?
They changed it. So back then it was Central Missouri State University, and now it's the University of Central Missouri. But yes, just for those that are watching, I met Dr. Rivers back then. I probably was a freshman working a summer program. It was a summer bridge program. And the idea was to connect students from schools in Kansas City and bridge them over the summer so they get that college experience of being on a college campus and learning what that life would be like. And Dr. Rivers was one of the mentors that came down to shadow with the students. And it's funny because one of the young adults that was in that program is coming up on Defying the Odds as well, because they were a part of the foster system. And so she will be speaking, Rosie will be speaking in a few weeks.
I remember Rosie, actually.
She's such a sweetheart. So she just agreed to come on and share her Defying the Odds story as well. And so that is how Dr. Rivers and I were able to meet. It's him giving back and being a part of that program.
Yeah. And I knew then that I'm not surprised at where Dr. Ward is right now. She was always community oriented. And so I'm not surprised where she is now. So from there, what's the next step? So I became an assistant principal. I did work in the Kansas School District. And I worked at Van Horn High School as well in Independence as an associate principal. I took 2 principalships, one on the East Coast and one in the Hickman Middle School District as well in Kansas City, Missouri. So through all of that, forget the titles, principals, the young people I met and the young people in need. And, when young people are in the foster care system and they know they're going to age out soon, it's very stressful. And I met quite a few of those students. What's next? And a lot of them don't have what's next. They really can't go home to a mom, to a dad, to a grandparent. And you would be surprised at the young people who actually start out as infants in the foster care system until 18.
Yeah.
I mean, and they stay in the system. And that's what they know. So to give them hope, to give them a belief that they're not left behind, organizations such as Greater Than Expectations is much needed. So those are my experiences, some of my experiences with young people in the foster care system, and my own experience in the foster care system.
Yeah. So I mean, thank you for saying that. Of course, that's why we launched this, is to specifically work with teens that are a part of the system, because they're getting so close. So, and just my personal, I'm in education as well. And I've always liked working with the older kids because being grown is right around the corner. And so I think we have lots of impact in those positions to help influence them. But when you're dealing with, like you said, the foster population, when, they may not have a mom or dad to go home to talk about what is next, whether it's college or career. And so I'm going to plug our scholarship really quickly. As you know, Greater Than Expectations announced this February that we were launching our Ariel Rideau Audacity to Succeed scholarship. It's $1,000. We're starting small here in the Dallas Metroplex area, and that is for any high school senior that has been a part of kinship care, currently in foster care, transitional housing, to continue their education outside of, it could be a 4-year university, it could be a college, it could be a trade school. Just, we want to do our part in making sure that we're supporting in some way, because we know that so many have no clue in what they're doing after they transition out. So thank you for all the work that you've done along the way. Thank you for being one of my personal mentors. You all don't know, but Dr. Rivers, when I said I wanted to be a school leader, I had the opportunity to do all of my observation hours with him at one of the schools where he was an associate principal. So just like how he's worked with the youth that are a part of this system and trying to impact their lives, he's worked with me to impact my life as well. And so I'm grateful. With that being said, Dr. Rivers, just thinking, what would you say? I know I've called you before and said, man, we don't have young men on the show. It's kind of hard for me to find young men for various reasons to be guests on the show, but we're working for that. Thinking about your younger self and looking at where you are now and how you've been able to overcome and impact so many people, what would you tell younger Jesse Rivers, maybe teenage Jesse Rivers, or young boy Jesse Rivers that was transitioning into foster care?
Right. Well, you know what? It's funny. Years ago, I was looking at the poorest counties in the United States, and this is a true story. Can't make this up. And one of the poorest counties was Tunica, Mississippi. And that's where my father and mother are from. And the second poorest county was a place called Lake Providence, Louisiana. And that's where my father's father is from. So I come from two of the poorest counties in the country.
Wow. Wow.
And my parents, they did the sharecropping and the farming and things of that nature from slavery. Okay, that's my family background. What would I tell my younger self is, and this may be cliche, but you really have to make it happen. Okay, and I'm starting a nonprofit called El Cabalon, Make It Happen Youth Empowerment. Mm-hmm. And El Cabalon is the original name of Africa. And make it happen is, you have to make it happen regardless of your circumstances, regardless of your birth, your socioeconomic status, your skin color, your sexual orientation. We all have those. But you have to have the wherewithal to make it happen. And I will say this, education is truly the equalizer. I always had a love of reading. Always, even as a baby in foster home, I loved to read. And reading saved me. And I was determined to make it happen. Even when you don't have a clue, there are people out there that's willing to help you make it happen. Yeah. Now, there's a lot of temptations along the way. I mean, really. And I faced many of those temptations along the way. And you're going to make mistakes. But as long as you have breath, you must endeavor daily to make it happen and really help people along the way. Because when you're dead and buried, and let's be honest, what is it you really leave behind? Okay, you leave a house that your kids are going to fight over. You leave a beat up car. Okay, big deal. You leave an insurance policy. Great. That's spent up in a year. But you leave a legacy.
Yeah.
You leave a piece of yourself, and you do not let that library burn to the ground. Okay. You pass that knowledge on to the next generation. And that's where I'm at in my life, really to empower the next generation to take it even a step further. I don't like when older people, if you will, for lack of a better term, hate on younger people. Okay. No, we need to encourage younger people.
That's right.
We really do. We don't need to hate on younger people. We need to encourage them and say, hey, now I'm going to help you avoid some pitfalls along the way if you are so inclined to listen. If you're not hard-headed, but if you are so inclined to listen, I'm going to help you avoid some pitfalls. And that can make your road a little smoother than the road I had. So as any parent would say, I want my children to have better than me.
Amen.
And that's it. So that's really what we want. We want the next generation to have it better than we had it. And the only way to do that is really pass on the knowledge that we acquired through pain, struggles, mistakes along the way. So that's really where I'm at position in my life to really begin to help prosper greater than expectations, because I know this organization is going to empower the next generation of young people, particularly Black and brown children.
Yeah.
Now we, white children as well, but we know Black and brown children. Dr. Ward mentioned those numbers earlier. It's outrageous. So let's break the stereotype, break the stigma of they're not part of us. They are part of us. And we really have to reach out and help them.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for doing your part. Congrats on starting the process and starting your own nonprofit. To all the youth and the adults, sometimes we need to hear it. Make it happen. He said, make it happen. It's like Nike. Just do it. Okay. No excuses. It's 2021. If the pandemic hasn't taught us anything, we need to make it happen. There's so many powerful stories that have come out of even just the pandemic of people making it happen. So let's make it happen. We can all commit to making it happen. So thank you for that, Dr. Rivers. We're getting close in time. So if there's anything one that you want to discuss or share before I ask you one final question, or if there's a question from the audience, I see people in the audience saying, make it happen. We're going to make it happen this year. So we're committing to that. Is there anything that, did we touch on everything that maybe you wanted to hit on? I don't want us to end without, if I missed anything that maybe you wanted to share or touch on.
Well, I just want to say, leave it with this, and this really is the work that you're doing. If you get a chance, volunteer.
Yes.
Just reach out and help with organizations, whether they need someone to serve dinner, pick up boxes. We can all give our time and talents. And so many times we get caught up in titles. Doctor, this, attorney, this, business owner, this. That means I just went through a process. It doesn't make me special. I just went through a process. Right. I spent time and money. I went through a process because it's something I wanted to achieve. But what's the core of you? And we really have to ask that question. What's the core of you? And I really hope that somewhere is to really help someone along the way, because I would not be here but for the work of many, known and unknown.
Right.
Dr. Ward would not be here but for the work of many. So I just think we have that burden to really pass it on to the next generation. I know, I have a stepdaughter. She's looking for, she's great administrator, great assistant principal, one of the most talented young ladies I know of. I tease her a lot of times and say, you need to get your doctorate, and when she's ready, it's incumbent upon me to be there to push her.
Right.
Because I can't take that knowledge to the grave with me, to give that to the next generation. So hopefully she can move forward in her career and help the next generation.
Awesome. Well, if there's any questions from the audience, you guys can drop them into the chat really quickly. If there's any, there may not be any. In the meantime, I will just say again, thank you, Dr. Rivers, for all of your work, for pushing the youth in the way that you have, for leaving behind, like you said, the legacy. It reminds me of the poem, The Dash. It's not about the start date and the end date. It's how you lived your life and the legacy that you want to leave behind. So thank you for all that you have done. You knew Memphis was not where it was for me, and I want to do something different, and you've made it happen. You've made your own trail and journey along the way, raising some awesome young adults and have impacted the system. There's just so much that you've done, and I can't wait for that story to be written, whatever that may look like or what that will be, and the legacy that you leave behind. So thank you again.
And I just want to say, as someone who's trying to be a godly man, I just really want to give a shout out to my wife as well, because now I'm in a partnership.
Hey.
Yeah. So my rib is with me. Now we get to take the next journey. And that's important as well. When you find a good thing, keep it. So I just like to say, to my wife, thank you for helping me along the way. So as we get ready for the next chapter, and hopefully it's as great as the previous chapter. So thank you once again, Dr. Ward. And I'm just so proud of what you're doing.
I'm proud of you. Look, from the audience, they said, come on, partnership. All right, Mrs. Rivers. All right. Yeah. Thank you for being the rib. Thank you for joining. You all could, if you haven't, feel free to go like us on social media, whether it's Facebook or Instagram page. Of course, everywhere you can find us at www.greaterthanexpectations.org, or at least that's the website. You can find us on all social media at greaterthanexpectations.org. Right now, we're highlighting women who became famous. So Foster to Famous for Women's History Month. Share our scholarship information with any foster youth that you know in the DFW area. Thanks for always tuning in and supporting. We love you all. Have a great day.